Survivor has introduced many advantages over the years. There are advantages that prevent you from being voted out, skip portions of immunity challenges, steal other advantages, the list goes on. However, none are simpler than the extra vote. All it does is let the user vote an additional time at a tribal council. Theoretically, it should be the easiest advantage to use, because the scenarios it would be useful in are so obvious. If you think a vote is going to result in a tie, you can use the extra vote to break it. Or you can force a tie if you think a person would be eliminated by 1 vote margin. These two voting scenarios are some of the most common you will encounter on the show. So surely the extra vote has a positive hit rate, right? Surely it has changed the outcome of a vote at least once, right? It took 30 seasons for the Survivor producers to think of the extra vote, with its first appearance coming in Worlds Apart. The advantage was won by Captain Hook's chief mate Dan Foley at the Survivor auction. Dan was not having the greatest season up until that point. His foolish antics made him a joke among the players, and no one took him seriously as a threat. But he was in the majority alliance, and they had a list of outsiders to vote off before they were forced to turn on each other. So Dan held on to his advantage until the final 6. At that point, the only player left who wasn't aligned with Dan to some extent was Mike. But Mike won immunity, so his alliance had to break up. Dan pushed for Carolyn to be voted out, as he believed Carolyn was a physical threat that could win the final immunity challenges. But some of his own allies considered voting Dan out. They didn't know what his advantage was, and they were worried that it was overpowered. At Tribal Council, Dan decides to make a power play. He hints that he'll be using his advantage tonight, which threatens his allies in a sign with him. His alliance folds and they vote for Carolyn like Dan wanted. Dan even sticks true to his word and uses his extra vote, proving his loyalty to his allies. Carolyn should be going home tonight, as she has the most votes cast against her. However, it is in this first usage of the extra vote where we encounter a big weakness: the hidden immunity idol.
If anybody has a hidden immunity idol and you want to play it, now would be the time to do so.
I'm not taking a chance, Jeff. I'm not going home tonight.
First vote, Carolyn. Does not count. Carolyn does not count. Carolyn does not count. Carolyn does not count.
Woo!
Carolyn does not count. 13th person voted out, 6th member of the jury, Dan.
So Dan got himself sent home on the night he used his extra vote. And it didn't even matter if he used his extra vote, since Carolyn would have gone home if there was no idol. Well, we have plenty more examples to go through, so eventually I bet we will find a time when the extra vote was useful. The extra vote next appeared in Survivor Go Wrong, where Tai Cheng won it at a reward challenge. Like Dan, Tai held on to it for a few votes as he wasn't in any immediate danger. He was in a 3-person alliance with Jason and Scott, but he actually wanted to turn on them and join his friend Aubrey's alliance. Aubrey accepted Tai into her alliance, and Scott was eliminated that night, followed by outsider Julia. After those vote-offs, Aubrey and her ally Sydney wanted to eliminate Jason, as he was obviously the odd man out. However, Tai had other plans. He believed that Michelle was a bigger threat than Jason due to her likability, and he told Aubrey's alliance that he was playing his extra vote on her. He also tried to reunite with Jason and get him on the plan. However, Aubrey's alliance did not agree with Tai that Michelle was a threat to win, and Jason correctly assumed that Tai held no power to actually eliminate Michelle. Tai played his extra vote that night, but it was in vain, as Jason was sent home in a 4-2-1 vote. For the second time, the extra vote had failed to make a difference. Although in hindsight, Tai had the right idea. After a medivac took out Aubrey's ally Joe, Michelle snuck into the final 3 with Aubrey and Tai, and she beat them in a 5-2-0 vote. If Aubrey went with Tai's plan, then both of them would have a better chance to win. Of course, if Aubrey's alliance did vote with Tai, then Tai using his extra vote would probably be unnecessary, as is the case with this next extra vote. The extra vote was brought back for a third time in Season 34, Game Changers. This was a return and player season filled with a dozen of the best strategic minds to ever play Survivor, so production was probably hoping that the extra vote would fall into the hands of someone who knew what they were doing. Unfortunately for them, it did not. Drea Wheeler obtained the extra vote, and she is not the smartest player to ever be on Survivor. She was gifted it by some dude who writes for the sitcom Kevin Can Wait while she was at Exile Island, but did not use it until the early merge. She suggested to her allies that, instead of going after someone from the rival alliance, they targeted Ozzy, who was the biggest challenge threat left in the game but not really affiliated with anyone. This would be a big move, as it would blindside about half the game, and she could only confirm that 4 of the 12 other players were voting with her. Feeling uncertain, Debbie decided to play her extra vote for safety. She ultimately got what she wanted when Ozzy was eliminated that night, but it came at a cost. The final tally was 1 vote Aubrey, 1 vote Sierra, 4 votes Zeke, and 7 votes Ozzy. This meant that Debbie could have voted for literally anybody besides Zeke, and Ozzy still would have gone home. While the Survivor Wiki technically counts this as a successful use of the extra vote, it was ultimately unnecessary, and she could have held on to her advantage for a more beneficial move in the future. Plus, blindsiding Ozzy left her with a target on her back. The other players were growing annoyed at her cockiness, and the rival alliance now set their sights onto her. Debbie was unaware of this, and entered the next tribal council expecting Andrea to be easily eliminated, only to walk out with her torch snuffed. Her elimination was decided by a difference of 1 vote. The next season, another extra vote would be found by Lauren Rimmer. She found it during the merge, and in order to use it, she needed to abstain from voting at the next tribal council, which is a common requirement for obtaining an extra vote in present-day Survivor. Later in the game, Lauren formed a Final Four alliance with Ben, Ashley, and Devin, 3 people who were in her bigger alliance of 7. The 4 of them dominated the next few votes, pitting the minority alliances against each other. Lauren also found a 2-piece hidden immunity idol. Word began a spread of Lauren's advantages, but she was not seen as the biggest threat in the Power 4 alliance. That was Ben, who was seen as the obvious favorite to win. Despite forming the Final 4 deal with him, at the Final 7, Lauren decided to target Ben. She wanted to recruit outsider Mike for the vote in order to maintain her numbers. However, she just spearheaded the elimination of Mike's last remaining ally the previous vote, so he wasn't very committed to Lauren. Meanwhile, Ben found out that Lauren and her alliance was turning on him, so he snitched to Mike about Lauren's advantages. Lauren had to give half of her hidden immunity idol to Mike as a sign of trust. This back and forth culminated in a heated tribal council, where Lauren publicly called out Ben's untrustworthiness, and Mike threw his half of Lauren's idol into fire because he is the GOAT. Ultimately, Lauren got what she wanted as everyone, even Mike, voted for Ben. But as Dan fully learned 5 seasons before, you should be careful when publicly announcing who the group is voting for.
If anybody has a hidden immunity idol and you want to play it, now would be the time to do so.
Hey, Jeff. I made this one for my wife, but when I went to read my letter with the rock, my wife led me to this one.
This is a hidden immunity idol. Any votes cast for Ben will not count. Ben does not count. Ben does not count. Ben does not count. 1 vote left. 12th person voted out, the 5th member of our jury. Lauren, can you bring me your torch?
Good game, Lauren.
Lauren's extra vote remained unused as she exited the game. If she suspected that Ben had a hidden immunity idol, she could have voted a second time for someone else. And upon a revote, it is possible that her allies would have banded together to save her. Of course, she also could have not given half of her idol to Mike, keeping it to herself in the event something like this happened. But that is not how the game played out, and Lauren found herself headed to Ponderosa. It's okay, it could always be worse. She could have squandered 3 advantages in 1 night. We are now approaching our 5th extra vote, and so far none have been used effectively. However, in Season 36, we come the closest to a correct use, but it may not be what you expect. The twist in Season 36 was the addition of Ghost Island. an Exile Island type place where players could win advantages that were misused by past players. Kellen won an extra vote at Ghost Island right before the merge began, and held on to it until the final 10. The players were split up into 2 groups of 5, and each group would attend tribal councils separately to vote off one of their 5. Kellen's group included herself, her allies Dominic, Wendell, and Laurel, and outsider Michael. At first, it seemed like it would be an easy 4-1 vote on Michael, but it quickly became more complicated. Michael had previously been the target 2 tribal councils ago, but played a hidden immunity idol to save himself. Now, Kellen's alliance was worried he had another one. Dominic and Wendell held their own hidden immunity idols to protect themselves, leaving Laurel and Kellen as potential targets for Michael. Laurel realized this dilemma, and she planned on voting for Kellen to save herself if Michael played an idol. However, Kellen suspected she was going to do this. So, to one-up Laurel, Kellen used her extra vote to vote for Laurel twice. So then Laurel would be eliminated in the event of an idol play. Dominic and Wendell still voted for Michael, and Michael, who didn't even have an idol, voted for Wendell. This led to a 5-person tribal council ending with 2 votes for Michael, 2 votes for Laurel, 1 vote for Kellen, and 1 vote for Wendell. With the vote technically tied between Michael and Laurel, the 3 other players had to choose between the 2, and Kellen reunited with her alliance to vote out Michael. Some might say that this was not a successful use of the extra vote because she did not eliminate the person she used it on. And ultimately that is true, but the point of the move was not to actually eliminate Laurel. It was a defensive move of self-preservation in the event that her intended target played an idol, rendered a little silly in hindsight as Michael did not have one. Long term, it did not have a major effect on the season. Kellen was eliminated a few episodes later for reasons that the extra vote probably could not have stopped. But Kellen's usage is by far the most creative we have seen, and at least she played her extra vote. The same could not be said for Sebastian, who was also on Kellen's season. Sebastian won back her used extra vote at Ghost Island, but he never played it since he never thought he had to. He was voted out at the last tribal council where he could use it, in a vote where using it would not have saved himself anyway. 3 seasons later, the extra vote showed its face again, appearing twice. The first one was found on day 13 by Rick Devins. Devins was voted out a couple days before, but was still technically in the game due to the Edge of Extinction twist, which allowed for an eliminated player to come back into the game if they won a skills challenge, while residing on the Edge of Extinction. Since he was not in the main game, Devins had to send the extra vote to someone who was, and he chose Aubrey, who you might remember from Co Wrong. Production probably loved that Aubrey got the extra vote, since in her first 2 seasons she was one of the more strategically dominant players, making the top 5 both times. She also already possessed a hidden immunity idol, while Aubrey was doing well swag-wise. On a social level, things were far from ideal. The majority alliance on her original tribe recognized her as a threat and wanted her out. When a tribe swap occurred, she was placed on a tribe with 3 members of the majority alliance, along with Wendy, a person from the other tribe. At first, Aubrey tried to convince her original tribe mates to target Wendy, but later made a plan with her and Victoria to form a women's alliance, and target the 2 men on the tribe. Unbeknownst to Aubrey, Victoria still wanted her out and only pretended to work with her to make her feel safe. Aubrey went to her first tribal council just hours after receiving the extra vote. That same afternoon, Aubrey actually broke off the women's alliance before Victoria could, and went back to campaigning against Wendy. She felt safe with Victoria, and did not feel the need to play her extra vote or hand immunity idol at tribal council. In other words, she let herself get duped by some first-time players on her 3rd time playing. On the same day Devin sent her the extra vote from the Edge, she found herself headed there to meet him. To be fair to Aubrey, her extra vote would not have saved her that night, but it still goes down as yet another extra vote that was never used. Aubrey would get a second chance with an extra vote, however. On day 22, she found one on the Edge, and she sent it to Aurora. Aurora was one of the only players who was genuinely aligned with Aubrey at some point in the game. Despite not having many close allies, Aurora survived a lot of tribal councils. She was typically used as a decoy vote so an alliance could blindside a more dangerous player. With the extra vote now in her possession, she began loaning it to other players to build trust with them. She first gave her advantage to Ron Clark, when the vote was between herself and Kelly Wentworth. Although Ron thought about voting for Aurora, he decided to keep her as a potential ally, giving her the advantage back the next day. A few days later, Rick Devins, who returned to the game at the merge, was the new target. However, he had a hidden immunity idol and many people suspected that. The tribe still planned on putting the majority of the votes on Devins to force him to play his idol, but if they did not come up with a backup plan, then Aurora would be eliminated as Devins was publicly campaigning against her. Victoria, who is still in control of the majority alliance, devised a plan to split the votes on Ron. To cement this plan, Aurora gave her extra vote to Gavin so he could vote Ron. While Ron at one point had Aurora's extra vote in his possession, now it was being used to eliminate him. Devins played his idol that night, sending Ron home with a final vote of 3-1. Meaning that the extra vote did not actually have to be played. A rather anticlimactic end to what was one of the more interesting extra votes we have seen so far. Starting in Survivor 41, a lot more extra votes were handed out to players through challenges of wits, such as correctly navigating a prisoner's dilemma situation. During these events, players can either choose to do nothing, or to risk their vote for a chance at an extra one. If they win the challenge, they win the advantage, but if they lose their vote at the next tribal council. To save on time, I will only go over the cases where players actually win the extra vote. But keep in mind, sometimes players try to earn an extra vote and end up losing the only one they had to begin with. If you factor in all of the lost votes that came from these challenges, then the extra vote curse looks even stronger. 3 people won extra votes in 41, and they were JD, Xander, and Deshawn. 2 of them used their extra vote, but neither were very successful. Deshawn used his at the merge during a split vote between Evie and Sydney. Among his alliance of 8, the plan was to have the 4 women vote for Sydney, and have the 4 men vote for Evie, with Deshawn's extra vote as a tiebreaker. But Nasir switched up on the plan. He held a personal grudge against Sydney and voted for her instead, meaning that Deshawn's extra vote was unsuccessful in eliminating Evie. But even if Nasir did not change his vote, it still would have been an unnecessary use, since Sydney played her shot in the dark, leaving just 3 minority votes that held little power in voting for a 3rd target. While Deshawn played his extra vote at the first tribal council he attended, Xander hung on to his for a long time, arguably too long. He watched his original tribemates drop like flies at the merge, until he weaseled his way into a majority alliance. He finally used it at the final 7 to vote out Liana in a margin of 5-3, meaning that, yet again, the extra vote was unnecessary. However, then there is the other player who received an extra vote, JD. JD was not a very good Survivor player. He wanted to keep his extra vote a secret, but on day 7, Shan caught him with the extra vote literally sticking out of his pants. As a sign of loyalty, Shan made JD give her the extra vote before each tribal council, so that JD couldn't use it. JD foolishly listened, and while Shan spared him the first time, on the second occasion, Shan stabbed JD in the back, voting him out to take the advantage for herself. Shan tried to employ a similar strategy on her ally Ricard, giving him the advantage before the next tribal council and asking for it back as a sign of loyalty. But Ricard called Shan out on her manipulative behavior, and even though he did give it back, Shan kept the advantage to herself until the final 10. Like in Ghost Island, the players split up into groups of 5 for tribal council, with Shan spending the vote with Ricard, Nasir, Heather, and Erica. Everyone wanted Nasir out, as he had a hidden immunity idol in his possession. However, Shan and Ricard were worried that if they put all the votes on him, then Nasir would play it and vote out one of them. To minimize the risk as much as possible, they decided to organize a split vote. Erica, Heather, and Shan's first vote would be on Nasir, while Ricard and Shan's extra vote would be on Heather. That way, it did not matter who Nasir voted for, as neither Ricard or Shan would be going home. Ultimately, Nasir voted for Heather, and after a revote, he was sent home 4-0. Once again, the extra vote was technically unnecessary, as Nasir did not play his idol or even vote for Shan or Ricard. However, it was never intended to be the deciding vote in this elimination, and Shan only used it as a safety precaution. But even though the outcome of the vote was better than most, the original holder was voted off 10 days before it was played, meaning that the extra vote curse carried over into the new era. Remember when Lauren Rimmer and Aubrey screwed up 2 advantages at the same time? This record would be broken in season 42 by Drea. At one point, Drea possessed an extra vote, a hidden immunity idol, a knowledge is power, and an advantage amulet. She only had to use her idol to make it into the final 7, where she believed she was in a majority alliance and had a path to victory. She told her ally Omer about her knowledge is power, which let her steal an advantage from another player if she correctly guessed that they had one. She intended to use it to steal her ally Mike's idol and subsequently vote him out. Everything seemed to go according to plan until Drea used their knowledge is power on Mike. Forced to tell the truth, Mike revealed he no longer had his idol. It was actually in the possession of Omer, who planned on voting out Drea with the rest of the tribe. Exposed as a crook, Drea used her extra vote on Mike as a Hail Mary to save her game, but was eliminated in a 5-3 vote. Despite all of her advantages, she was unable to use any of them to save herself from elimination. At this point, that might not be very surprising considering one of them was an extra vote. However, Drea was not the only player in 42 who won an extra vote, as Marianne obtained one at the same time Drea did. Despite being considered to be eliminated first, Marianne integrated herself into her tribe, and was genuinely in Omer's alliance. But after Drea went home, she, along with her allies Mike and Jonathan, realized that Omer was now the favorite to win and they needed to do something to stop it. This would be tough, since Omer's ally Lindsay had a hidden immunity idol type advantage she could play to save Omer, and Lindsay was not going to turn on him. In order to flush the idol, her alliance would need to split the vote, which the 3 of them could not do alone. Marianne needed to either use her extra vote, or recruit the outsider Romeo into the plan, who Jonathan and Mike wanted to split the votes on. Ultimately, Marianne chose to do both.
Romeo, 1 vote Jonathan, 1 vote Romeo. Romeo, tied again. 2 votes Jonathan, 2 votes Romeo. Omer, that's 2 votes Jonathan, 2 votes Romeo, 1 vote Omer. Omer, 2 votes Jonathan, 2 votes Romeo, 2 votes Omer, 1 vote left.
You did it. I did.
13th person voted out and the 6th member of our jury. Omer.
Wow, good job.
This is the closest we have come to an extra vote being used effectively, but it still falls short of being necessary. It may look like Romeo was in danger if it went to a 3-way tie, but Mike always wanted Omer out, and if it did go to a 3-way tie, he would have happily switched his vote onto him. Even if it was unnecessary, it was a flashy move in front of the jury, and one of a few late game moves Marianne used to prove her case as being worthy of the sole survivor. Marianne won Survivor 42, becoming the first winner to possess an extra vote at some point in the game. It only took them 14 attempts, compared to the 3 attempts it took with hidden immunity idol holders. The extra vote returned in season 44, when Lauren Harpe won it by abstaining from voting in her first tribal council. As is tradition, she held onto it until the merge. In the first official merged tribal council, Lauren was one of only 5 people who could vote, and because her alliance held a majority, she didn't use it. At the next tribal, she believed that her alliance obtained the necessary swing votes, Carson and Jam Jam, to vote out Franny. While technically true, the swing votes failed to tell Lauren's alliance that Danny was gonna play his idol on Franny, completely ruining their plan. Instead of Franny, Lauren's ally Brandon was eliminated at tribal council. Still believing that the swing votes were with them and that the idol play was a fluke, Lauren and her alliance planned to split the votes at the next tribal council. To prevent a potential knowledge is power from being played, Lauren gave her ally Jamie the extra vote, who in turn gave Kane her hidden immunity idol. Jamie's idol was fake, but no one realized it until after the game, making what's about to happen all the more shocking. To complete the split vote, Jamie used the extra vote on Heidi, expecting this to be the backup in case the main target Danny played an idol. But, blindsiding Lauren and her allies, the swing votes voted with the minority alliance, sending Kane home with Jamie's fake idol while flushing Lauren's extra vote down the urn. Another season, another failure. finally, we have arrived at season 46, the latest completed season as of writing. 2 extra votes showed up here, and they were won by Tevin and Maria during a challenge of wits. It's okay if you forgot that either of them had an extra vote, because neither one was used very well. Maria used hers the first time she could to vote out Jem in a 4-2 vote. This was yet another unnecessary use of the advantage, but at least Maria used it. The same cannot be said for Tevin, who was voted out early on in the marriage with the advantage in his possession. However, even if he did use it, so many people voted for him that it would not have mattered. As of today, the curse of the extra vote is still very much alive. 17 seasons have aired in full since the introduction of the extra vote, and from what I've found, not a single one has ever been used to change the outcome of a vote. The closest ones are Shannon 41 and Marianne 42, who used their extra votes as part of a vote split. In both cases, the vote split worked and their intended target went home, and to give Marianne more credit, her tribal council was the last time she could use her extra vote. So there was not going to be a better opportunity to use it. While Shan and Marianne's plans were successful, Shan's extra vote forced a tie when she could have kept it and sent Nasir home right away. Marianne's extra vote broke a tie, but if she didn't play it, then Omer still would have gone home on a revote. The only purpose these extra votes served were fancy reinforcement for a plan a majority of people were comfortable with. I don't know what it is with the extra vote, but something about it is seriously cursed. Dan, Ty, Deshaun, Drea, and Jamie all used their extra votes on targets that did not go home. Debbie, Gavin, Xander, Marianne, and Maria all used their extra votes on targets who are going to be eliminated anyway. Lauren Rimmer, Sebastian, Aubrey, and Tevin either let their extra votes expire or were eliminated with it in their possession. Shan stole JD's extra vote and then used it as part of a split vote when she didn't need to. And finally, Kellen used her extra vote as an act of self-preservation in the event that an idol was played. A smart plan in theory, but negated when you realize the idol did not actually exist. To put into perspective how unlucky the extra vote is, the shot in the dark is an advantage that was added in Survivor 41, and has appeared in all seasons since then. Each player in the game gets one by default, and using it gives them a 1 in 6 shot at immunity in exchange for sacrificing their vote. This advantage has only been used 12 times, has given a player immunity twice, and saved someone from elimination once. An extra vote has never saved anyone from elimination, and it has been in the game for 3 times as many seasons. All it's done is bring pain and misfortune to its many holders. And among the 20 or so people who have held onto the advantage at any point in time, only one has gone on to win. Maybe someday, when Survivor is on season 103, an extra vote will finally make a difference at a tribal council. But until proven otherwise, it will haunt the game of any player who is unlucky enough to win one.
Congratulations, you now have power in the game. This advantage allows you to steal a vote from another player at Tribal Council.
I don't know if I was really expecting to have this much power in the game this early, but hey, look, I told myself this is what I wanted to do, and I'm doing it, baby. That's how you do it on Survivor.